Hello and welcome back. This is the K&L Sports Huddle, episode number 50. Recording this on Monday, February 16th. And as you can see, no Logan today. He's a busy guy, had some obligations this week. Plus, I owe him twice, actually, for going solo a couple times for me last year. So you get me for approximately 30, 40 minutes. Will be a shorter pod today. Just a little NBA reacting to this past weekend's All-Star weekend. Did the NBA just save it with this new format? We'll see. And continuing my MLB all-time rosters reveal. Really fun here. We get to do the AL Central team. So make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Every bit of it helps. Or if you prefer listening on Spotify, the link to our page is in our YouTube channel description. You can also get us on Instagram at HuddleKL Sports for breaking news and clips from our episodes. Let's start off with a little weekly Whiplash, a few headlines from this past week. Pebble Beach winner, we got Collin Morikawa wins the first signature event of the season. Great job by him, but I think one of the bigger stories out of this weekend was Scottie Scheffler trying to pull a comeback again after last week's big time, getting back to where he was before that awful first round that he had. He came with it, he made up 7 shots on Sunday with a 63. Was definitely up there on the leaderboard when it came down to it. But Collin Morikawa is your Pebble Beach winner. Tyler Reddick wins the Daytona 500, leading only the final lap and giving Michael Jordan, of all people, his team a win and a stunning start to the season, which did include a 17-car pileup, which led to Tyler winning this one in Daytona. The U.S. right now, if we're checking in on the Winter Olympics, is currently sitting, I believe, 4th in the medal count at the Winter Olympics in Milan. They have 5 gold medals, which is 7 off the leader Norway. And I believe actually, looking at this updated Team USA, their bobsled team actually was able to get a gold and a bronze. So pretty cool there. So we've actually moved up the leaderboard a little bit there. And then finally, we got the Miami Dolphins releasing 8-time Pro Bowler wide receiver Tyreek Hill ahead of his 2026 contract guarantees. Probably good for both sides with this one. He's been a little cranky, diva receiver for them. It's been a frustrating couple of years for the Dolphins. And I think if the Dolphins can get rid of him too, just start a full reset with this roster, they could see a light at the end of the tunnel going forward with this franchise. But that'll do it for the weekly Whiplash. Let's move on to the Hardwood. As I said, we're going to react to a little bit of what we saw in this past weekend's NBA All-Star festivities. And as I teased at the top, did the NBA just save the All-Star game with this new format? Just watching what unfolded, at least on Sunday, players actually gave a shit, about this game. The format, what I liked about it did break up the game into 4 chunks, 4 quarters really. Really just placed more urgency because of the shorter time constraints. And with each team, you had your stars and your stripes and your world team basically playing a round robin tournament within a 4-quarter game, which is pretty cool. But you actually saw some guys really step up, especially Kawhi Leonard. Can't forget about him and his game, but his quarter 3 performance with his 31 points in 1 quarter. That was pretty special. But it's year 1 of this format. It was a resounding success. You actually saw players really going at it, especially Victor Wembanyama and Anthony Edwards. Anthony Edwards actually admitting to the fact that Wemby was the reason that he started trying. he saw what he was putting forth, the effort that he was putting forth in that game, and he wanted to match it. He wanted to go up against it. And Ant was really the guy that I was hoping to see really break through and try to bring the energy needed to make these All-Star games worthwhile. But it was really Victor Wembanyama. He was the catalyst that really changed everything for this year's All-Star game. And like I said, Ant responded wanting to go at him as a result. But this is really great for the NBA because they've been actually the topic I was wanting to do today was basically talking about all the issues going on with the NBA, and many other podcasts have, you know, delved deep into that discussion of all the different things that are wrong with the NBA, the effort, the length of the season, the tanking. Um, we're still going to get to that definitely in another podcast when Logan's back. But seeing what happened on Sunday, Wemby really just, at least for a short period of time, I'd say the next 24, 48 hours really has stalled that discussion a little bit because everyone was so excited to see what happened in yesterday's All-Star game. And for a guy who's been hyped up since before he even entered the league, everyone was talking about him, this 7'4" freak of nature, alien looking guy out of France that was supposed to be the second coming for the NBA, and the guy that was supposed to take over once this past generation of guys, LeBron, Curry, Durant, the generation that I grew up with, moved on. That needed that face of the league. And he seems to be the only guy that really wants it. We've had basically this foreign infestation of the NBA with guys like Nikola Jokic, Luka Doncic, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Giannis. None of them really want that face of the league spotlight. They kind of just shrug it off, just doing their thing, and they're really good. They're really great players who, three of those four guys have won MVPs since coming to the league. So, but then you have Wemby, who seems to really relish the opportunity to become the face of the league, and I think he can. And we might be entering a phase of the NBA history where we look back on as the Wemby era, right, as a central piece that could potentially save the NBA and make it a more marketable product. As we obviously all the issues that I mentioned just a minute ago. He might be the one guy that could turn the tides in terms of what we've been seeing in the NBA these past few years. And this was one step. This was one problem out of all the issues the NBA has that I think they got right finally after multiple different times, different years that they've tried to change this to make it more fun, more interesting, to get the players to actually put forth an effort, because there's been some really, really bad ones these past few years and some confusing formats this year, very similarly kind of confusing. But as Kawhi Leonard said, they were just going to figure it out, and they did. It was a lot of fun. The last game obviously was a bit of a blowout, but they can't all be gold. But as long we got an All-Star game that topped every All-Star game for the past 15, 20 years, except for maybe the 2020 when they did like the team LeBron and they won by 2 points. Still ton of scoring, not a lot of defense. And there wasn't a lot of defense in this game. Obviously transition defense is lacking, but you didn't see, the guy, jumping to defend a 3-point shot and then continuing on down the court. And then after the made or missed shot, them throwing it the length of the court. You didn't see that every possession. It happened a couple times, but that had become basically the go-to play for NBA All-Star game. So this was a success. It remains to be seen whether this can carry over year to year. I hope it does. I think they need to do some tweaking with how they do the USA rosters. Great that USA won. I thought they had no shot with the way the world team was stacked. But with only really Wemby giving it his all, guys like Jokic and Doncic and some of these other guys, they don't really care still about the All-Star game, but Wemby really showed out. But I do think with the USA rosters, it seemed to be the old guys and the young guys the way they split it up this year. And I think if they do a little more of a balancing act between the two teams, there could be more competitiveness within that. But yeah, I think it was a resounding success. I think about some of the best All-Star weekends. Obviously, if you look back through the years, most of the best ones are in the 20th century, but you do have a couple at the turn of the century. The 01 with Allen Iverson taking the East back from 21 down. Think about the 03 with Michael Jordan's final All-Star game. Those are pretty vivid for most people who were around to watch that. I would put this one right up there in terms of this century's All-Star games. Now, for the whole weekend, the whole All-Star weekend as a whole, they're still lacking on Saturday. The dunk contest is a joke. I mean, Logan and I talked about this last week. Everyone else has talked about this for years. The stars just don't come out. I mean, outside of Chase Richardson and Jackson Hayes, I didn't know the other two guys, and I wasn't really impressed with the fact that those were the four guys that they chose. But honestly, that's about the only guys who were willing to do it. The big stars, LeBron James, Kevin Durant, all these guys who were great in-game dunkers who could probably put on a really good show at the dunk contest, just don't want to be embarrassed. They don't want to have happen what happened to Chase Richardson when he tried one of his dunks, and honestly, kind of scary because of the way he hit his head on the court. Probably should have been checked out for a concussion on that one, but bit of a scary situation. But imagine if that were LeBron or KD or any of these other big stars that are in the league right now. For one, the team and the coaches and the trainers are all hearts are skipping a beat if something like that happens to him, but also the embarrassment factor that these guys just don't want to be embarrassed to miss a dunk or even something like that happened to Jace Richardson happen. At this point, there's not a lot you can really do to fix the slam dunk if the stars aren't going to come out to perform in it. It's probably a few years away from just not even being televised. I mean, I just wouldn't, because who wants to see a center dunk a ball? Like no one really wants to see Jackson Hayes dunk a basketball. We want to see, honestly, we want to see shorter guys. We want to see guards and wings doing this thing, because the shorter the better, right? I mean, think about Nate Robinson. He was like 5'9", 5'10", doing crazy things during that slam dunk competition that he performed in. So yeah, all right. So not impressed with the slam dunk competition. Just think might as well get rid of it or try to change up the rules somehow. I heard, Bill Simmons on his podcast talk about like maybe doing a tandem dunk, having like teammates do dunks and just within a certain time limit instead of like opportunities to do dunks. So that could be a good idea. Instead of just certain amount of opportunities, do a time limit. That could be interesting. Just as many dunks as you can do in a certain time limit. That could be interesting. 3-point contest was still pretty interesting. It wasn't that great. Obviously, you don't have Curry in there, but pretty cool to see Damian Lillard defend his title. The 3-point contest is really where you see most of the bigger stars come out. Your top 3-point shooters are going to most likely be in this competition. So that is the good thing about it. It's really the main event at this point for All-Star Saturday over the slam dunk competition. But it's lost a little bit of its luster, but especially this year, just didn't feel as big as it has in the past few years. The Shooting Stars competition don't really. I mean, that was the event that replaced the Skills Challenge, and honestly, I might be in a bit of a minority here, but I actually liked the Skills Challenge. I thought it was cool, like just having something for the really skilled ball handlers and passers to have something for those guys. And I feel like now we just kind of have two shooting, demonstrations with the Shooting Stars and the 3-point contest. I was actually a fan of the obstacle course, the Skills Challenge, but that's just me. I wish they would bring that back. That would probably help for me as far as All-Star Saturday, but that day has just become, honestly, I mean, nothing's gonna amount to what Major League Baseball can do with its All-Star Week, with the Home Run Derby leading up to the All-Star game. But I think at this point you might as well just give the players an extra day of rest. Just give them All-Star Saturday for a rest day, and then come back for the All-Star game, and then they might be more energized to do that as well for Sunday. But yeah, I think all in all, the main takeaway to come out of this weekend was it was a success, the format that they used, and the fact that, I mean, even above the format, all they ever needed was someone to give a shit. and Victor Wembanyama was that. Him and Ant were the two catalysts for this, and I think maybe it was just a generational thing, the LeBron generation of stars who kind of just didn't really care about the All-Star game. Thought it didn't matter or mean enough to them to put forth a lot of effort. Because before them, it was a lot of fun All-Star games. If you look back at YouTube videos of the 90s and the 80s, there's definitely some effort being put forth in those games as compared to the stuff in the 2010s and the some of the games are early this decade. But maybe this new generation of stars like Wemby and Ant can revitalize it, and maybe we have a bright future for the NBA All-Star Game headed forward. But it does remain to be seen if this can carry over into next year. But I really hope it does. All right, now it is time to move on to our MLB segment, the rotation. I promised the AL Central all-time teams, and that's exactly what we're going to do. So we've got the Chicago White Sox, the Cleveland Guardians, Detroit Tigers, Kansas City Royals, and the Minnesota Twins. So again, same things as last week when talking about how I chose the players on these rosters. Mostly historical impact and legacy first, stats and accolades second, but obviously they kind of worked hand in hand. Postseason runs and obviously tenure with the franchise, those are more just like deciding factors between different players who I kind of have on the edge when deciding. Those can just be like, end of the day final factors that come into play whenever I'm trying to decide between two guys. And you do notice on some of these teams, as I said last week, where if there's a few championship teams within their history, that sometimes the rosters gravitate towards those teams, and you'll notice major contributors to World Series champions ending up on these rosters. So let's get right into it. Let's start with the Chicago White Sox. Surprisingly, only 3 World Series titles since they started back in 1901. More surprisingly, they have 12 Hall of Famers on this all-time team. So notable players that in the middle of this order that you'll notice, the Big Hurt, Frank Thomas, and Shoeless Joe Jackson, a couple of the best nicknames in baseball as well. Our second Carlton Fisk sighting, as he actually played more seasons with the White Sox than he did with the Red Sox. Most people may not know that. He's best known for his Red Sox days and the waving of the ball to stay fair. But with the White Sox, he was arguably a better hitter. And I think as far as you look at different catchers within their history, a lot of them are, Gold Glove winning. Obviously, we got Sherm Loyar on this one as a backup for Carlton Fisk. But I thought Fisk, with his hitting prowess, definitely deserved a spot on the roster, and to have that second iteration of the player show up in these all-time teams is pretty cool too. 3 Hall of Famers on the bench too, with one of them being a questionable inclusion in Harold Baines. We won't talk about that one though. But you do have Nellie Fox and Louis Aparicio rounding out the middle of the middle infield. Gives you a full Hall of Fame middle infield with both the starters and the backups. So you've got Eddie Collins and Luke Appling, followed by Fox and Aparicio. So pretty good up the middle defensively, and all 4 of those guys can hit for average pretty well during their careers. So that's one of the biggest strengths of this roster. As far as AJ Pierzynski's exclusion of this team, he was a major contributor to that 05 championship team, but I didn't want that recency bias to cloud my decisions here. And what with the better all-around catchers and Fisk and Loyar, Pierzynski was a below-average hitter for the White Sox, and didn't do enough for me as far as defensively and stats and accolades to be able to make it onto this roster. Sherm Loyar is an 8-time All-Star and 3-time Gold Glove. I mean, he racked up a lot of stats and accolades during his time with the White Sox. So, like how this one worked out, you got Maglu in right, Minnie Minoso in left. So it kind of rounds out that outfield where I did put Shoeless Joe in center field, because there really wasn't a lot of center field depth with this franchise. Just a lot of forgotten names that reasonably forgotten. Just didn't want to have them just shoot into a center field spot on this roster just because I needed it. And Shoeless Joe Jackson is really just an outfielder. He can play all three spots, so I thought it best just to put him there to be able to make this lineup really click. Looking at the pitching staff, got a lot of old timers here. MLB's all-time ERA leader and dead ball legend Ed Walsh, Chris Sale, Mark Burley. Keep that modern balance in the rotation. You have Billy Pierce and the spitballer himself, Red Faber. The bullpen features another Hoyt Wilhelm appearance after we had him in the Baltimore Orioles team last week. Bobby Thigpen takes the closer spot over other pretty worthy pitchers for his then MLB record 57 saves in 1990. A couple notable names that did miss the cut on the pitching staff: Eddie Sykott, who was part of that 1919 Black Sox scandal, and Early Wynn, who did win a Cy Young in Chicago in 59, but only spent 5 seasons with the Pale Hose, while he spent most of his career with another team who was up next. Just looking at this roster, pretty solid. It actually surprised me how many Hall of Famers were actually on this squad, given that they've only won 3 titles in their history for such a long history. They've always been the baby brothers to the Cubs, even though the Cubs have had that huge 108-year drought of championship teams, but have always been looked more highly upon than the White Sox, and for good reason. There's been a lot of bad White Sox teams. Some other guys who missed the cut: Jose Abreu, Carlos Lee, Jermaine Dye, Jim Thome, which again you'll probably see him pretty soon. Yeah, some other pitchers: Jack McDowell, Thornton Lee, Liam Hendricks. I thought about getting him on there, but just not enough time, I think, and he's probably more suited for a Oakland A's appearance. But let's move on to the Cleveland Guardians, or if people want to keep it real, Cleveland Indians. 11 Hall of Famers on this all-time roster, in which this franchise hasn't seen a World Series title since 1948. It's now the longest streak since the Cubs won in 2016. That hasn't stopped them from producing or acquiring some top-tier talent. So we get another Tris Speaker sighting here in center field after we had him on Boston. Players from the 90s core, take guys like Jim Thome, Albert Bell, Manny Ramirez, and Sandy Alomar Jr. So we get a lot of that, very popular 90s teams that did go to the World Series, wasn't able to finish the job, but were some really fun teams back in the 90s. Second base is stacked. Well, you have your dead ball legend Nap Lajoie, who the franchise even named their team after for some of those early years in their history, as they were called the Cleveland Naps. And then you have Roberto Alomar backing him up, who put up only 3 very strong seasons in an Indians uniform, and just not a ton of second base depth on this in their history to warrant anybody else making the roster. And Roberto Alomar, a Hall of Famer himself, so you get a pretty good 1-2 punch at second base. Could go Victor Martinez as the starting catcher, honestly. He's got the better bat, but I did go with the better defensive catcher in this spot with Sandy Alomar, with already a ton of pop in this lineup. So I did go Sandy Alomar to keep it, keep the defensive side of it good at the catcher position. A loaded outfield with some pretty interchangeable guys, as Larry Doby, the first African-American player in the American League, gets the DH spot. Shoeless Joe Jackson does have a case to be on this team. He doesn't make it. His stats with Cleveland were technically better than his stats with Chicago, but he just doesn't feel like a Cleveland guy. And I wasn't willing to boot out any of these other outfielders. I mean, Manny Ramirez, Albert Bell, and Larry Doby, and then of course Kenny Lofton. I wasn't going to boot any of those guys off this roster for him, because he just, when you think of Shoeless, you don't think of the Cleveland Indians. So had to leave him off. As far as the pitching staff, 4 of the 5 pitchers in this rotation are Hall of Famers. This is one of the best ones outside of maybe Boston's starting rotation that we've gone over with these all-time rosters. You got the 2 Bobs, Feller and Lemon, along with a couple of early era pitchers in Addie Joss and Stan Kovaleski. Had to go way back into the baseball reference pages for those guys. Then we have Corey Kluber to bring some modern representation into the rotation. Obviously, a big part of that 2016 squad that went to the World Series against the Chicago Cubs. The bullpen features 3 starters that would serve as long relief. So I got 3 of those guys in there. A long history of great starting pitching. So we did get CC Sabathia, a Cy Young winner, Sam McDowell, and yes, here's the early win sighting. There he is. Franchise saves leader Doug Jones got the closer spot for me, but he's joined by a group of solid arms with Jose Mesa, Cody Allen, Andrew Miller, and Emmanuel Clase, who is under a gambling investigation currently. So we'll see where he ends up staying on this roster or not. But you can't argue his stats, what he's put up in his time with Cleveland, just absolutely deserves it. Even if somehow he's been, doing some under the table stuff with his pitches. I don't see how, because he's been putting up absolutely gaudy numbers with the Cleveland Guardians in recent years. Cliff Lee is the toughest cut here on the pitching staff, but there may be room for him elsewhere. Because even though he won a Cy Young in an Indian uniform, his whole body of work wasn't enough for me to keep him around. Had a lot of high 3, low 4 ERAs that just kind of kept him off the radar for this one. So, but there is an opportunity for him to be on another team in the future. Some of the guys that I looked into as well, one guy really jumped out for me here was Travis Hafner, mainly a DH, but a first base primary. Just couldn't boot out anyone else for him. Obviously, some great stats during his time with the Indians, but that was probably one of the hardest cuts for me on the lineup side. But I mean, you already got Jim Thome at first, and then you could have shoot him in at DH, but then I'm having to get rid of somebody off the bench because I'm keeping Larry Doby. So decisions. It's what I got to do to fit everybody on this roster. I only get 26 spots to match a real life roster, so that's who I went with. Moving on to the Detroit Tigers. 4 titles spread out across the 20th century in 35, 45, 68, and 84. You'll notice a lot of players from those squads here, but 6 Hall of Famers in the lineup, and there are some of the greatest to ever do it. You got Ty Cobb, Hammer and Hank Greenberg, and Mr. Tiger himself, Al Kaline. Can do some different things with this lineup, given that Miguel Cabrera can play both corner infield spots, and Hank Greenberg with the left field position flexibility. You can throw Miggy at first base, put Greenberg in left, put Greenberg at DH. You can just do a lot of different swaps between third base, first base, left field, and DH with this squad. But this is just how I kind of landed with Miguel Cabrera. Just focus on hitting. That's what he's best at. So I put him at the DH. Kirk Gibson, best known for his walk-off homer in the 1988 World Series for the Dodgers, put up his best years with Detroit and was featured on that 84 title team. So definitely had to give him a spot on the bench. Wasn't going to move off Willie Horton and left, part of that 68 squad. And then obviously you got Ty Cobb and Al Kaline. You can't move off those legends. Up the middle, also Hall of Fame, Alan Trammell and Charlie Gehringer. And then you got Lou Whitaker to back up Gehringer at second. So a lot of great players from Detroit's history, even though there's only 4 titles to show for it. But definitely a lot to show. A lot of great legends on this team. Looking at the pitching staff features Cy Youngs and MVPs galore. When you have guys like Justin Verlander, Hal Newhouser, Denny McLain manning the rotation, you've got the workhorse Jack Morris, and then Mickey Lolich rounding out that rotation. Verlander and McLain both have won the Cy Young and MVP award in the same season. McLain in 68, Verlander in 2011. So you got a couple of guys who put up an absolute just crazy season on the mound, because it's hard for a pitcher to win MVP. That's why they have the Cy Young award for them. So for both of those guys to have an MVP award to go with their Cy Young in the same season, that's some pretty good stuff from those guys. And then in the bullpen, I included Tarik Skubal. I went back and forth whether to include him or not, but even though it might be his final year as a Detroit Tiger, once this 2026 season is over with. I couldn't help but include him because of his past 2 seasons are two of the best you'll ever see. He's racked up back-to-back Cy Youngs, the Triple Crown, and has been a big part of as big a part as any of the Tigers getting back to the playoff scene. In the bullpen, we've also got at the closer spot Willie Hernandez. This was a pretty easy choice here because if you look at that 1984 title team that he was a part of, he became one of only 9 relief pitchers to ever win the Cy Young Award, one of only 4 relief pitchers to win the MVP award, and one of only 3 relief pitchers to win both in the same season. The other 2 being Raleigh Fingers and Dennis Eckersley. So that's a pretty special season. That season alone gives him the spot for me. And his whole body of work with Detroit, his time in Detroit gets him at that spot. There's not really another guy that can move him off of that closer spot. Jim Bunning, who I am confident we will see again on another roster, gets a spot on this Tigers roster with his 7 straight 10-plus win seasons as a Tiger and the lone Hall of Famer in this bullpen. We'll see if Skubal can stay around. I'm not saying he will. But if the Tigers can lure him to stay, maybe start spending more money, do what the Dodgers are doing and spend a bunch of money, maybe he'll stay. So yeah, as far as guys that I also thought about, there were 2 guys, some old timers from back in like the dead ball in the 1920s, 30s era, Harry Heilman and Sam Crawford, a couple of right fielders that I usually include on this roster. But I thought just those guys are really that I always had on the roster because of their stats alone, and I just feel like they don't have kind of the legacy or the historical impact when people think of great Tigers players. They don't automatically go to those guys. I thought to go with Horton and Gibson as the couple of outfielders instead of those guys. Definitely deserving based on their stats alone, but I just think as far as representing the Detroit Tigers history, it's not something that's going to move the needle a bunch for me with Heilman and Crawford. Maglio Ordonez, who did show up previously on that White Sox squad, I did consider him too. Had some pretty good seasons with Detroit. Obviously, it was part of that 06 team that went to the World Series against my St. Louis Cardinals. Tough luck for them, but my Cardinals got themselves a championship that year. On the pitching side, we got one of the best names ever, Schoolboy Rowe. We got Hooks Das, Todd Jones, who is actually the all-time saves leader for the Tigers. I just didn't get him on there because most of that is just because of tenure. He pitched more seasons than I think any other reliever in Tigers history, so that's the reason why he just has more saves than other people. So on a per season basis, it wasn't as good as the other guys that I have in this bullpen. But Jose Valverde was a guy I really considered. There's a lot of different teams that he can show up on. I promise you will see his name, but I think it was only like 2 seasons he played for the Tigers. Let me check that real quick. I want to make sure that I'm not just leaving him off for no good reason. Because I know he played for Houston, he played for Arizona. Yeah, it was 4 seasons with Detroit. He did lead the league in saves in 2011. I was actually top 5 in Cy Young. But there was a big drop off after the 2010 and 11 seasons. 12 and 13 were not that great. And so yeah, I think that's part of the reason why I kept him off this list. So that's the Detroit Tigers. Moving on to the Kansas City Royals, the lone expansion team, but the scrappy stepchild of this division for sure. Got their start in 1969 and have won 2 World Series titles since in 1985 and 2015. And you'll notice the majority of this roster pulls from those title-winning teams. No surprise there. Mostly under the radar. Guys, not names that really jump out at you unless you are a diehard Royals follower. The one newest addition is at shortstop, Bobby Witt Jr. He's already solidified himself as a superstar in this league and at a position on this franchise that is pretty thin on talent. I mean, you talk about the 2 guys that really give him the most competition for this position, Freddie Patek and Alcides Escobar. I would say Escobar is probably his main competition. His stats and Patek's stats don't come close at all. even though Escobar's impact on the 2015 title run uh, definitely gave him some consideration in my mind, it just doesn't keep him there. Didn't want to fit him on the bench either with the other talent that they've had come through their organization. And up until a couple of weeks ago, this lineup only had one Hall of Famer in George Brett. But with Carlos Beltran's latest induction to the Hall, this Royals team now features two. So good on them. Carlos Beltran, obviously, most of his best years came with the New York Mets on those great teams with Jose Reyes and David Wright. But his early years with the Kansas City Royals had some pretty stellar seasons. He's just one of those dynamic five tool guys, and definitely deserves a spot on this Royals roster given the history. The lineup side was light on 2015 representation, unfortunately. I did have to include Lorenzo Cain to help that on the bench, which kind of makes up for a crowded center field room with Wilson and Otis. With only Salvi and Alex Gordon represented, I needed another, and it will at least add some outfield depth. A lot of outfielders for this team, but that's just kind of how it landed for me here. Hosmer and Moustakas don't have enough for me to include them here. I definitely wanted to try to fit them in, but with already two first basemen, Hosmer was not going to move the needle over Sweeney or Mayberry, and then Moustakas being like a second base, third base type of guy, he wasn't going to move off of Frank White or George Brett. Frank White, lots of Gold Gloves. He ate up most of the American League Gold Gloves for second baseman during his time with the Royals. So definitely, even on the bench, like when you're trying to fit in guys like Otis and Cain, and you need a backup catcher with Darryl Porter, these guys just weren't going to fit on the roster. On the pitching staff, the rotation is fine, but the bullpen is really where this team shines. You do have Brett Saberhagen and Greinke kind of feeling as top-heavy as the rotation can feel with those two guys manning the top two spots, and then Kevin Appier, Dennis Leonard, Paul Splatorf. Kind of feels more reminiscent to the Baltimore Orioles rotation, where it felt kind of top-heavy with Jim Palmer and Mike Messina. But I think the Royals are a little bit better with the two Hall of Famers. And then I think just across the board on the rotation, a little bit better than the Royals, but just feels very reminiscent of that. But like I said, the bullpen is one of my favorite bullpens that I'll go over with this. So you get Dan Quisenberry, the submariner, getting the closing spot with the great mustache. Wade Davis, Greg Holland, part of those 2015 squad. Jeff Montgomery, Kelvin Herrera, and Joaquim Soria. Just some really great names from Royals history getting to be on this one. Threw one starter in there, Charlie Librant, for long relief, but this is mostly high leverage arms bullpen. Not like the Guardians where I did fit in three starters. This one's mostly high leverage right-handed pitching, and just fit Librant in there so we'd have a lefty in there and not have it just be all right-handers. I made sure that all my bullpens were as balanced as I could get it. So we do fit Librant in there as the lone lefty. Not a lot of guys that I had to consider outside of like I said, Hosmer and Moustakas. I did think about Bo Jackson for a quick second, but just could not fit him in. His stats just do not warrant him being on this roster, even though he was kind of a polarizing figure, and the fact that he played football and baseball during his career. So that's the Kansas City Royals, and we'll finish things off with the Minnesota Twins. So lots of Hall of Famers in the lineup. You got Rod Carew, Joe Cronin, Kirby Puckett, Carmen Killebrew, Joe Mauer, Tony Oliva, and Goose Goslin, all Hall of Famers for this team. So a deep history that goes back to before the Minnesota days as the Washington Senators. Before they moved, and we got another Washington Senators team, and then we got they moved to Texas, and then we got another Washington team. So Washington's seen a few teams come through their city, but solid lineup. You got some versatility with Harmon Killebrew. He's kind of like a Miguel Cabrera. He can play each corner infield spot, but he can actually play some outfield too. But I decided to just keep him at first. You can hide him defensively a little bit better there. And then I put another first baseman player, Kent Herbeck, at DH. So that felt like it made the best lineup. Maybe not the best defensively, but as good as I could get it, keeping Killebrew. Um, I, I wanted to keep him in the field just for the sake of. I don't even think there was a DH when he played. So, looking at the bench, we got guys like Torrey Hunter, Justin Morneau. That was part of like my era of watching baseball growing up. I was seeing those two guys for the Twins. Chuck Knobloch, who might be more famous for his time on a New York Yankees championship team, but put up his best stats with the Twins before that. So, pretty good, solid lineup for the Minnesota Twins. Looking at the pitching staff, though, this rotation features 3 Hall of Famers in Walter Johnson, Jim Cott, and Burt Blyleven. And obviously, you've got Johan Santana, who I can't believe isn't a Hall of Famer yet. Given the fact that he has 2 Cy Youngs and a Triple Crown in 06. Just a modern era ace for this squad. Obviously, Walter Johnson, the big train, the franchise's original legend, and one of the greatest pitchers in MLB history. You can say what you want about the era he played in, but you can't deny the stats. He's kind of got that Cy Young, the player Cy Young stat sheet on Baseball Reference. Just a lot of records that won't be broken. Jim Cott, 12 Gold Gloves with the Minnesota Twins, so one of the best defensive pitchers up there with like a Zach Greinke type. Burt Blyleven, one of the best curveballs in history, and a Hall of Famer in his own right. And then Frank Viola, the 1988 Cy Young winner, 1987 World Series MVP, was hugely impactful and has left a lasting legacy in Minnesota Twins lore. The bullpen obviously had to go Joe Nathan here. He's the franchise saves leader. Nobody was moving off of him, but you still got guys like everyday Eddie Guardado, dependable lefty. He's put into like a setup position here on this roster, along with Rick Aguilera, 1991 World Series closer. Jeff Reardon, Glenn Perkins, and then Furpo Marbury, who was a 6-time AL saves leader and was one of the first like really true relief pitchers in history. I mean, he played back in like I think the 30s and 40s. So one of those early era relievers when they first started to really cycle them through and actually give them that position as a relief pitcher. And then we got a couple starters, true starters here: Camilo Pascual and Jim Perry, brother of Gaylord Perry, who we'll probably see much later down the road. But a Cy Young winner in his own right in 1970. So pretty solid team. I don't know how I'd rank this one. I think with the AL East, it was pretty clear. Yankees, Red Sox are like right at the top with like Orioles, Blue Jays, Rays. But this one, man, you have 4 teams with history that dates back to 1901. With only one expansion team in this division, it'd be hard to rank. But I guess just eyeballing it here, I'd go Tigers, Guardians, Twins, White Sox, and Royals at the bottom, just because they just don't have the history that the other 4 teams have. And I tell you, if they were to be put into a 162 game season, it would be a fight to the finish. I think all 4 teams would be in the running for the division crown. So that is my AL Central all-time teams. Let me know what you think in the comments. We'll obviously be posting these on our social media. Each one getting their own post with I don't know if you guys have seen ones from last week with AL East, but getting a song to go with the city or the team. So getting it personalized for each squad. Let's finish things off with the final word. What to watch for. We've obviously got the Genesis Invitational, which is headed back to Riviera on the PGA Tour. Riviera Country Club, after last year's wildfires, relocated the tournament to Torrey Pines. So glad that it'll be going back to where it should be for this year's tournament. And then college basketball this week is loaded. So tomorrow, hopefully you guys watched this before this game happens, so you guys know about it. But we got number 1 Michigan, newly minted number 1 after the AP polls came out today. Number 1 Michigan goes to West Lafayette at number 7 Purdue, top 10 matchup on Tuesday. Number 23 BYU at number 4 Arizona on Wednesday, and then Arizona has to go right back on Saturday and play number 2 Houston. And then we've got number 1 Michigan versus number 3 Duke in DC on Saturday. Those 2 games right there, the top 4 teams in the country playing on Saturday back-to-back. It's going to be a really fun day of watching college basketball. We've also got number 6 Iowa State at 23 BYU. All of that's on Saturdays. A couple teams this week are having some tough schedules with Michigan, BYU, and Arizona all having a couple of ranked matchups this week. So definitely catch all of that this week and watch a lot of good basketball. But that's it for me. That's the show. This has been the K&L Sports Huddle. I'm Cage Kiplinger. May your bets hit, your team not choke, and your stress level stay manageable. We'll huddle up again next week.